You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of Massachusetts.
Don't you dare touch that dial or change the channel, because it's Sunday at 7 p.m. and you're listening to The Hard Truth on WRKO. Good evening, everyone. I'm John Deaton. Listen, there is never a slow week in the news when you have President Donald Trump in office. And boy, is there big news dropped in the last couple days. We're going to get to that. We're going to have a special guest, an independent journalist on that I want to highlight. I said I was going to highlight people in the community, ordinary people trying to do extraordinary things. We like to highlight those folks here at The Hard Truth. Remember, you can reach out and touch me at john@hardtruthshow.com, john@hardtruthshow.com. Now, bombshell, potentially of news, released yesterday by the Director of National Intelligence. That would be Tulsi Gabbard. And basically, we know that there was a huge claim in the 2016 election that Donald Trump has summarized as Russia, 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 and whether or not the Russian government had interfered with the election of an American president in favor of Donald Trump. There was the Mueller report. There were Senate Intelligence Committee investigations. There was a Department of Justice investigation. There was the Steele dossier. Remember that the Clinton campaign paid this guy, Christopher Steele, who wrote this intelligence report where they said that Russia had something on Donald Trump. I mean, they were talking about things like prostitutes peeing on each other in hotel rooms, and that Donald Trump was a Russian asset. He was Putin's you-know-what. And so ultimately, we learned that by the Senate Intelligence Committee, the DOJ, and the Mueller report, that Russia didn't end up having any kind of real impact on the election, that they were never able to engage America's election infrastructure. The Senate Intelligence Committee, led by Marco Rubio, did find unanimously that Russia attempted to interfere in any ways that they could. But I'm going to let Tulsi Gabbard explain in her own words what she released as the Director of National Intelligence. Okay, so listen to this. This is Tulsi Gabbard, everyone.
Now, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey, and others, including their mouthpieces in the media, knowingly lied as they repeated the contrived narrative that was created in this January 2017 intelligence community assessment with high confidence as though it were fact. John Brennan, as CIA director, stated in a memo to his agency staff in December of 2016, saying, quote, "There is strong consensus among us on the scope, nature, and intent of Russian interference in our presidential election." This was reported by NBC News, confirming that Brennan, along with James Clapper and James Comey, agreed with the CIA's assessment that Russia intervened to help Trump win the presidency. As Obama's Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper was tasked with overseeing the creation of this assessment in January of 2017 by President Obama, and he expressed confidence in its findings. In a 2018 interview with the Harvard Gazette, he talked about how he provided Trump with the same classified assessment that President Obama received, which is the high confidence judgment that Putin directly ordered the hacking and election interference. Clapper then went on to add, "I think they, the Russians, actually influenced the outcome." This is a brief summary of the details that you'll find within the House Majority Staff's report in their investigation into the Obama-directed January 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment that leads us to the very same conclusion that we announced in the release of our documents on Friday. The implications of this are far-reaching and have to do with the integrity of our democratic republic. It has to do with an outgoing president taking action to manufacture intelligence to undermine and usurp the will of the American people in that election and launch what would be a years-long coup against the incoming President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Wow. Basically, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has basically alleged that President Obama, using the CIA Director, John Brennan, the other intelligence operatives like Clapper, Comey from the FBI, that they all conspired to indulge, fabricate, whatever words you want to use, exaggerate this Russian interference, and that, in fact, according to that report, that Clapper basically said Russia did influence the election. And the reason this is big news is because Tulsi Gabbard declassified a memo, which was a presidential brief, the presidential daily briefing, PDBs, and they concluded in December. It was a December 9th meeting, and this report, this daily briefing, had concluded that Russia did not interfere with the election, meaning that they were not able to, hack into the Dominion election results, the voting machines, and that they weren't able to actually, hack into certain infrastructure of the United States, and that, they might want to, but they actually weren't able to pull it off. And what ends up happening is they bury that brief. And, it's called classified information, and it goes and gets placed in a vault. And Donald Trump wins the 2016 election, obviously. And because these CIA director and FBI director and director of national intelligence and national security agent, all under Obama, believed that Donald Trump was a threat to democracy, however you want to do it. According to Tulsi Gabbard, they basically were trying to save democracy, right? By sacrificing democracy, because then they got together, according to Tulsi Gabbard, and conspired to basically say the opposite of what was concluded by the intelligence community, that Russia didn't actually interfere, but they were going to say, no, that Russia did interfere and that Russia did help President Trump. And now you have words being thrown out there like treason. You have words being thrown out there like indictments are coming down. People want an investigation. You have people out there, like the Jesse Waters of the world, calling for the arrest and indictment of President Obama. This is terrible news for the country. There is no doubt about it. But basically, we are at a place, and I think it all started many ways because of this approach that the Clintons and the Obamas and all of these other intelligence agencies, they viewed President Donald Trump as a threat, and they believed that they were going to do whatever they could to help save America. And so we saw a former president, and I'm talking about Donald Trump, get prosecuted for things that other people didn't get prosecuted. And we've seen President Trump be indicted. We've seen President Trump be sued by attorney generals. We've seen all that. And I want to remind people out there that, Hillary Clinton's firm, her campaign, I should say, paid for the Steele dossier, which was all a lie. Okay. And the campaign that Hillary, when they paid that law firm that hired Christopher Steele for that lie, the campaign called it a legal expense because they paid a law firm who paid Christopher Steele. And the election committee, Federal Election Office, decided that Hillary Clinton, that was improper. And that violated the law. And her campaign was fined $134,000. Well, President Trump called his NDA with Stormy Daniels, right? His lawyer paid Stormy Daniels off, and then Trump reimbursed his lawyer, Michael Cohen. So Trump's campaign then labeled it as a legal expense because they paid a lawyer. Same thing that Hillary Clinton did with the Steele dossier. But his campaign doesn't get fined $134,000 like Clinton's campaign. He gets indicted. He gets prosecuted for the same thing. And when we think about it, and you all know that I wasn't a big Trump guy. A lot of you don't like me for that, but I'm going to call things the way I see it. What Hillary Clinton did was worse because it was saying that a Russian foreign government was using a presidential candidate as an asset. That's treasonous, and it was not true, and they called it a legal expense. Well, Donald Trump simply did the same thing over an agreement with someone he had an affair with, right? And a personal agreement, like, okay, I don't want my wife to find out. I don't want this. I paid my lawyer. I call it a legal expense. And instead, he gets a criminal conviction. And now we're going to see if his administration is going to do to Obama and Clapper and Comey and Brennan what the Biden administration did to Trump. We're going to see if the DOJ, listen, it's terrible news. We have so many things in this country we have to deal with, important things. I'll touch about this on next week's show. We'll figure out what's going on. But when we come back from the break, I'm going to bring on an independent journalist. We got a lot to talk about. Don't touch that dial or change the channel. It is Sunday at 7 p.m. and you are locked into The Hard Truth with John Deaton. Good evening, everyone. It's Sunday, as usual. It's been a busy week with President Trump as the president. There is never a slow day in the news. But we're going to start the show. And remember, you can reach me at john@hardtruthshow.com. That's john@hardtruthshow.com. I said I was going to bring on regular citizens who I believe are ordinary citizens doing extraordinary things. I have a very special guest. That's Jess Machado. I'm going to let her introduce herself. But Jess, welcome to the show.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
All right. So why don't you tell us a little bit what you're doing right now, who you are, where you live, give us a little background information, and tell us what you're up to today.
Sure. My name's Jessica Machado. I'm an independent journalist based down in Bristol County, Fall River, New Bedford area. I've been completely independent, working on my own since January of this year, but I have a background working for another local media outlet as well as a radio background. And primarily what I do is investigative journalism. So I am looking at things that mainstream media does not look at, and then digging around, asking questions, and then sharing that with my audience. I covered the Karen Reed trial 1 and 2, which allowed me to build a really great base. And post-trial, those people stayed. They stuck around. They were really happy to have people that aren't connected to mainstream media, legacy media outlets that are funded from God knows where. And so I'm completely independent. I work on my own by myself. I love a good FOIA request. So public records requests are my favorite thing to do. Get that information and then make it easily digestible for readers and listeners and then share it with everybody. I've covered extensively the migrant crisis here in Massachusetts for the past 2 years. And I've broken several stories regarding that. A location next to me in the Taunton area at the Clarion Hotel, which is finally closed, but I uncovered a bunch of different stories out of there, as well as dissecting all of the incident reports that came out of the Healy hotels across the state. and kind of breaking those down and sharing with regular tax-paying citizens how their tax dollars were being spent. So it's very rewarding work. I love doing it. It doesn't feel like work. And as a conservative in Massachusetts, I feel like it's my responsibility to share that information with regular voters who I think really would like to vote or lean to the right, but they don't have access to the truth and information. And I found, especially in areas like Bristol County where I'm working, when voters hear both sides of the story, they vote responsibly, and that is why Fall River, for the first time in the history of Fall River, they voted for a Republican president in the majority, and we've been able to flip some really long-term seats held by Democrats down here because we give people the truth, and they're smart. Voters are smart, so they figure it out on their own. But we've got to kind of have more of me and other people like me around the state to get that information out to voters.
All right, there's a lot to unpack. You're in. Where do you live?
I'm in Somerset,
All
Massachusetts,
right,
down in
you're in
Bristol County.
Somerset. All right, and so you're based out of Bristol County.
Yes.
Now, right now, I want to make sure we do this a couple times, but I want you to let people know how they can reach out to you, contact you. Also, I want people to understand, and we're going to unpack it, but, Jess is an independent journalist, investigative journalist, covering stories that mainstream media do not cover. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But the only way she's able to do that, she's got bills, right? And we want her the truth. How can they reach you? How can they donate to make sure that we have people like you out there digging the truth for us?
That is an important part of this. When I told my family I was going to kind of go out on my own, I was like, we're going to be poor for a little while. So, like, hang in there. So, my supporters can help in a couple of ways. The first is on my X account, so Jess Machado Show, and that is my platform everywhere, whether it's on YouTube, X, Substack, Instagram. It's Jess Machado Show. You can donate right there in my profile. There's a little money symbol. You can make a cash donation through Venmo. Otherwise, you can subscribe to my Substack. There's a monthly, yearly, or like a legacy donation option where you can support my writing right on there. And then advertisers who are interested in advertising with my show, once we get started next month, they can reach out to me through those platforms, and they can advertise with me. I know it's crazy. I put my phone number out there for people who want to share stories, tips, or contribute or help out. It's posted on my X account, and you can find it on there. It's pinned at the top. But I let ease of access and communication, so people can reach me through those platforms.
Okay, and just so you know, for the listeners, that's Jess Machado. So it's JessMachado Show. Jess Machado Show on X, YouTube. Please subscribe. Now, why don't you? Did you ever work in mainstream media at any point, Jess?
So I got hired by a AM radio station out of New Bedford called WBSM, and they are the AM version of a mainstream media town square media company. Anybody down here would know it's Fun 107 is their FM version, and I got hired by that station to do an AM Saturday show for 3 hours to talk politics, and I did it for about a year and a half. 3 hours every Saturday. The first hour I would talk local politics and news. The second hour would be state, and then the third would be national. And I grew a really great following. People, first of all, there's no women conservatives out there other than I would say Grace Curley that has her show with the Howie Carr Network. But there's no women out there that are talking, especially conservative women in Massachusetts. But I knew that there were people around me that wanted that. And so I started there. So not quite mainstream. It was an AM station. And I did that for about a year and a half. And then I started writing for a very small local media outlet called Fall River Reporter. It's a veteran-owned small media outlet down here in Fall River in New Bedford. And it was only for 1 year, but that's when I really started doing these investigative pieces. I was a freelance writer, but I didn't do it for work until I started working for them. And I just started, digging into stories, things that I was curious about naturally. The migrant crisis certainly was getting me aggravated, and I needed to know more. And so I was empowered to write about that. So That's really it. Nothing really mainstream media. I say all the time, if someone from mainstream media called me today and offered me a job, I would turn it down. I'm not selling my soul out to those people. And they have no control over what they say or do. I worked with a lot of those people on the Karen Reed trial. Great people, really nice, very professional, but they are owned, and their opinion and the truth sometimes doesn't always make it out to the main group of people that subscribe to mainstream media outlets. So never really worked in it, and I don't envision myself doing it in the future.
All right. What's your explanation for why we don't see more stories in mainstream media, whether it's the Boston Globe or whether it's local television? For example, I'll give one issue that I don't understand why there isn't a significant amount of attention on the failure of the fact that the state legislature is violating the law and not cooperating with an audit that 72% of the voters demanded be the law. I don't see enough coverage on that. I certainly did not see enough coverage from mainstream media on what was happening inside these Healy hotels. Sure, there was a bust where they said, yeah, there was a guy that had fentanyl and a gun, and he was running drugs, and they report something like that. But you didn't hear about the 660 serious incidents. You didn't hear that about, unless it was from people like you. You didn't hear about the 700% increase in police calls at Fall River. All because of these shelters. I would value your opinion because you're in news and I'm not so much. Why do you think they just turn a blind eye to it? Because I don't think there's any other way to say it other than turning a blind eye to it.
Well, I have no doubt that politicians and people with money control the media here, and that's a fact. I don't know how else to say that. There are political power players in the state of Massachusetts that have a direct line to the Boston Herald and the Boston Globe. That's fact. I don't know how else to say that. The other thing too is these news organizations are slowly crumbling as mainstream media recognizes that people don't believe them and they've lost trust in them. And so you see all the time, the Herald News, for example, which has been a staple, news company down here, closed its doors. It consolidated with other newspapers in the area. They fired all their staff. They're not getting the advertising. They don't have the money, and they can't afford to pay people to do what I do. And even if they could, they wouldn't, because they're controlled by politicians and, people from not even in the state, to be quite honest with you, that are controlling what you and I read in those publications. So that's the first thing. I mean, listen, they can't afford the work that I do, and also I think they're scared. The truth makes people uncomfortable. It really does. The truth of the Healy hotels and what was happening with those incident reports, for example, John. It was really difficult things to read. And I spent 3.5 days reading every incident report that the Mass GOP had requested. I poured over each one. I read in detail, although highly redacted. You can't unring that bell when you see the things that were happening in there. And I'm just going to tell you, reading about that in a regular news publication or on your 6 p.m. news is never going to happen, because the reality of it is it's disgusting. It's difficult to hear, and people don't want to hear that kind of stuff, or the news doesn't want to give it to them. I find people do want to hear it. They need to know what's going on. And if they don't, we have to make sure they see it anyway, so that when they get to the voting booth, they remember these stories and they're like, okay, we have to make that attachment for them. This doesn't just happen. It's your elected officials and your leaders in the state, and that's how your money's being spent and what it's being spent on. And so I don't know, I feel it's a very important job, but yeah, mainstream media is not going to do it. I'm telling you.
Well, when you were saying that they're told what to do, I have this vision, I'm sure you've seen it, where all the news stations, local stations all across the country were reading the same script on a daily basis. Okay, we're going to cut for a break. When we come back, we're going to dig into some of the stories. I also know that Jess received an award. We're going to talk about that. Come back. You're listening to The Hard Truth on WRKO. I'm John Deaton with Jess Machado. You can reach her at Jess Machado Show. Come right back. The Hard Truth is paid for by the Deaton Law Firm. I've been representing mesothelioma and lung cancer victims for 23 years across the Commonwealth. If you or a loved one been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer and were exposed to asbestos, you contact me at the Deaton Law Firm. That's DeatonLawFirm.com. You can also reach me here at this show at thehardtruthshow.com. That's John at hardtruthshow.com. John at hardtruthshow.com. All right, welcome back to The Hard Truth. This is John Deaton. You're listening to me interview Jess Machado, a independent journalist working out of Bristol County. And Jess, I understand I was present on a night that you received an award. So I know you're modest, but why don't you tell us what that award is?
Yeah, I did. I received Journalist of the Year, Female Journalist of the Year at a Lincoln Reagan dinner. And first award I've ever received, to be honest with you, but it definitely felt great to be acknowledged by, first of all, people in my party. But for the work that I'm doing, I would like to say it's a thankless job. It's not. It's every day is rewarding, but it certainly felt great for people to say, "Hey, we see you. We really like what you do. We appreciate the work you're doing, and it's making a difference." So, yeah, I was very excited to receive.
Well, congratulations. It's well deserved. We were talking about the serious incidents reports in the Healy's hotels, and mainstream media doesn't want to put. This show is called The Hard Truth. Those reports that you were looking over talked about things like child rape, didn't they?
They did. Child rape, a very serious pattern of domestic violence, child neglect, suicide of adults and children, guns, drugs, very unclean conditions. And there were a lot of them, thousands of reports. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the reality of the inside of those hotels. I didn't necessarily need those reports to see that. I've been inside one of the hotels. I've seen things, by being present. And I've also had tipsters on the inside for well over a year that were sending me photos and things. And the conditions were disgusting, not even temporarily, but for years. These people were living in really unkempt conditions with gross bugs, rats, mice. But then on top of that, the incident reports themselves detail, unfortunately, really uncomfortable human behaviors that have been brought in across the border and funded by your tax dollars. And that's the thing that always kind of hung in the back of my mind. Every report I read, every piece of that report, from the housing to the police to the schooling, the transportation, all of it is funded by you
Yeah,
and
what
me.
people got to understand is that, these hotels, you're talking about obviously the rent of a hotel. And I've seen the cheapest I saw was, 180, 160 in some hotels. But you're talking about $5,000 a month for a hotel room in a lot of these cases. Uh, I, were there catered meals brought to these folks as well?
Yes. So, a basic operation is you've got a family, let's just say a family of four. They're in a hotel in Taunton. They are getting 3 meals a day, brought in from outside locations, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They're also getting food stamps. So they're getting a food benefit that they can use to get food inside their actual rooms. And that they can use. They're getting cash benefits. They're getting transportation to and from wherever they want to go, John. So if a parent, for example, wants to go to a parent teacher conference at their child's school, they just go downstairs to the desk and say, "I need transportation," and they get transportation to go to the school, to go to the mall, to go to a doctor's office. The Taunton Hotel did not have laundry facilities there, so they have a company that would come and pick up their laundry once a week and then do a wash, dry, and fold, and it would be folded neatly and dropped right in front of their hotel room door once a week. On top of that, you've got health insurance, you've got legal defense funds, that are funding any type of legal defense, public defenders for the people that are getting charged and charged with crimes, health insurance, phones, schooling. I mean, you name it, they're getting it. A recent report just came out and said that the average cost for a family right now is around $3,800 a week. I mean, what Massachusetts tax-paying family could not benefit from that kind of money, and how life-changing would it be for some people to have those kinds of funds for a month, a year, 2 years? I mean, And it's perpetuating. I've said this so many times. I started talking about this weeks ago, well, months ago, really. Just because the hotels are closing doesn't mean that the funds stop. It's just relocation of these same people to another place, and the money is different. So now they're paying, for rent in private homes or, private buildings through the home base program, and perpetuating the hemorrhaging of taxpayer dollars that way.
And I got I got two theories on that. You can tell me if I'm, you think I'm wackadoodle or not. But one is she's shutting down the Healy hotels and moving them, maybe to help hide them from deportations. Number one. Number two, she's got an election. It's election season. We know that I've had Brian Shortsleeve on my show. I've had Mike Keneally on my show. I believe Mike McNogue is going to get in the race soon. I'll invite Mike on the show. All friends of mine. They're all going to get equal opportunity. But I'm not sure if there wasn't an election that she had coming up that she would even move them out of the Healy hotels.
I think your theories can both exist at the same time. I do think that, moving them and getting them out of there is to hide them. We have no idea where they are. So only through tips and through people that have kind of been in these places am I able to kind of pinpoint some locations of where they are, but we don't know. That's a dangerous thing, by the way. So these women who were facing domestic abuse in these hotels, they had a hotel desk they could run to downstairs and say, hey,
Yep.
he's hitting me, or he's doing something to my child, or he stole my debit card. There's nobody saving you in a private residence at this point, and there's nobody documenting it. So these reports, again, the circumstances don't stop. It's just that the parameters of it are now gone. So yes, moving them and hiding them from possible deportation or any type of ease of access. And also too, the optics of closing these hotels. It drives me nuts when we see mainstream media say, oh, the hotel's all closed by their final date. It was simply just relocating these individuals. You had 23,000 people come into Massachusetts through the Biden border, infiltration. They didn't disappear, and we didn't deport them. They're still here with the same problems. And we don't hear a lot about them transitioning to financial independence. We don't hear about them being self-sufficient, working. We don't hear any of those things. All we're hearing right now is we've moved them out of the hotels and they've closed, but those same services and the same funding is still happening, just somewhere where we don't know now.
Now, do we know how? I read, it could have been something that you wrote, to be honest with Jess, but I read that in Taunton, one car service had it was either a $6 or $8 million contract related. Do we know how these contracts get rewarded? Whether there's multiple bids? Listen, I'm an outsider to politics. I ran, yes. I may run again. We'll see. But I have no trust for these politicians. I mean, I've already know that that Healy rewarded her friend from Blue Hub and allowed a law where people can't sue this predatory lender against people in disadvantaged and underserved communities. She's already done that kind of favor for her donors. So, I believe, are these no bid contracts that are just being handed out, or is there any transparency about this process?
So I'd like to revisit the Blue Hub thing in a minute because I broke that story between C
That's where I learned it.
Cherry. But in regards to these no bid contracts, one of the things that I should mention is the Massachusetts is in a state of emergency. That declaration was made by Governor Healy back in 2023. And just so that you know, and your listeners know, under no other circumstances other than a weather related event, such as a hurricane, a flood, or a snowstorm, and that gas explosion that we had many years ago, there has never been a state of emergency in Massachusetts for something like this. So that declaration and that blanket statement of state of emergency does give her a certain level of freedom where she doesn't have to put out bid contracts. She can spend in ways that you normally wouldn't spend. So I have been asking that question, when are we going to see that state of emergency end? Does it really feel like an emergency today as it did in 2023? Did it even really meet that threshold? She said yes, but I think it was obvious that she knew that that was going to give her some sort of blanket protection to make all of these swift decisions under the air of secrecy and non-transparency. Because again, emergency means, think about this. If you have a fire or something, hey, we need to spend money right away. We've got to help these people. We've got to get them in housing right away. Boom, boom, boom. Let's make fast decisions. It's not meant to last years. I think we've only seen, honestly, I think the most a week of a state of emergency. We've never seen one in Massachusetts that's lasted years. So she's given herself that protection. She just recently extended it to November of this year. So she's asking for more time to have this power, and she's going to use it. She's very good at it. And as far as transparency goes, John, I put in public records requests to the Office of Housing and Livable Communities, which is the one part of our government where we're supposed to be able to get all information relating to the Healy hotels. And it is so hard, John, to get information from them. If I'll ask a question, I'll say, hey, I'm interested in learning about the transportation costs. We don't know what you're talking about. You got to be more specific. But then they get like another 25 days to respond. So it goes back and back and back. Sometimes it's not very clear. Sometimes the numbers don't add up. It's hard to get that information. I know that some people have been doing a good job of kind of trying to extract that information from the state. I know that the short sleeve campaign just put in some public records requests. I love to see people do this. I want more of it. But it is very difficult. If I could ask for anything to be changed in the state right now, that I think that could really make change for everybody, it's the ease of access to information, how your tax dollars are being spent. The public records request system is archaic, it's lengthy, and it's not transparent. And we should be able to have right at our fingertips how our tax dollars are being spent all the time. We shouldn't have to ask for it. We shouldn't have to dig for it. It should be available for you and me right on our laptops.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to take a break in a minute. We're going to talk about the Blue Hub. I want to talk about that story that you broke. In 30 seconds, you followed Karen Reed 1, Karen Reed 2. So I'm going to ask you, did the jury get it right?
100%. Definitely got it
They
right.
got it 100%.
Different case this time around. They did a great job.
Okay. And I predicted, I didn't predict that she would be guilty of a DUI or anything like that, but I obviously, as a former federal prosecutor, predicted that a not guilty verdict was the only
I think they got it right.
that made sense. So when we come back, we'll finish up with Jess Machado. You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Hard Truth on WRKO. I'm John Deaton. You can reach the show at john@hardtruthshow.com, john@hardtruthshow.com. We are talking to Jess Machado of the Jess Machado Show. You can go to Jess Machado Show on YouTube, on X. You can donate to this independent journalist who is doing the investigative work that the mainstream media refuses to do in the seek of transparency and truth. Now, I got to tell you, your Blue Hub story is something that hits home with me. You know a little bit about my background, extreme poverty. I grew up on welfare and food stamps. My first year of law school, I lived in Roxbury. And there was this, why don't you tell us in your own words what Blue Hub was doing and what you ended up doing a great job of breaking?
Thank you. So this actually started last November. Governor Healy was at a press conference and she was talking about, I believe, like an economic development package that she had put together for $4 billion. And it was just a regular presser. And State House media reported that some guy showed up and started yelling at her about this mortgage situation. And I remember reading that, and I was with my boss at the time. We were at Starbucks and we were like, what is he complaining about? I don't know anything about this. So we looked into it, and that night started digging. So Blue Hub Capital is a nonprofit company here in Massachusetts. The CEO of that company is Elise Cherry. She is a longtime Maura Healey supporter. She financially supports her. She has held many fundraisers for her. And in news interviews, both of them have spoken very highly and affectionately about each other. They have a long-standing friendship. This goes back to when Maura Healey was the Attorney General. And so Blue Hub Capital has many different compartments of what they do, but this particular piece was a mortgage company that would tell people who were low income that were facing foreclosure that they could help them. And essentially, what they would do is they would, let's just say, John, you have a house for $300,000 and you lost your job, and you're falling behind, and Bank of America is your lender, and they're ready to foreclose on you. You get a cold call or a letter in the mail or an email, or maybe you're down at food stamps and you're trying to get on public assistance, and they offer you this company called Blue Hub Capital. They're going to help you. So you meet with Blue Hub Capital, and what they do is they're going to buy your home from you and take over that mortgage from Bank of America, and then they're going to sell it back to you right on the same day. And that's what they would do. So, John, you go to this meeting and they buy your house from you for $300,000. They pay off Bank of America. You're no longer in foreclosure. They're going to sell it back to you on that same day. These transactions occurred on the same day. You don't have money for closing costs. If you did, you could be paying your mortgage, right? So you don't have the money for these fees or anything. Don't worry. Blue Hub Capital is going to just add that into the new loan. So now you've got a loan for $340,000 with Blue Hub Capital. The interest rate is a little bit higher, but hey, they saved you, right? No big deal.
Right.
Now, fast forward 5 years from now, John, you've got a job, you're back on your feet. That mortgage rate is a little too high. It's time for you to refinance. So you go to your local, bank in town and you say, I'm ready to refinance. They get you all the way down and they pull the title and they realize that there is a second mortgage on that property and you don't know anything about that. They pull the docs and they realize that on that day you signed two mortgages. One was for the mortgage that you've been paying all this time, but the second is for an appreciation mortgage, which means that if your home now today, John, is worth $500,000, it's gone up $200,000 in the past 5 years, you have to pay Blue Hub Capital 40% of that appreciation value in a balloon payment if you want to do anything. So now, John, you've got to pay $80,000 to Blue Hub Capital on that day of that closing. You don't have that money. And if you do take it out in equity, for example, now your mortgage payment is going to be much higher than what it was supposed to be.
Than it was before, which defeats the purpose of refinancing it to begin with.
Correct. So now you're stuck. Now you're stuck with it and you can't refinance. And you go, okay, first of all, I didn't know anything about this. Second of all, now I'm stuck. You don't refinance. So now forever you're stuck paying that, let's say 7.5% interest rate. Fast forward, now the loan's 30 years. You're getting 25 years. It's time for you to consolidate, make changes in whatever. Now the property is worth way more. Blue Hub still gets 40% of that appreciation value, robbing your family of an opportunity to start generational wealth or giving you an opportunity to use your money to go and retire or do whatever. They are being accused of predatory lending practices. And many of the people who had these extra mortgages have now joined together in a lawsuit to sue them. As this lawsuit has moved forward, nobody has talked about it. But during that press conference, one of those homeowners started screaming at Maura Healey because in that bill that she was putting together and signing into law that day was a provision for companies just like Blue Hub Capital to say that they could not face legal action. And the parameters of that bill and that piece in there actually only fit one company in the state of Massachusetts, Blue Hub
I wonder what company it is. Maura Healey's good friend, her donor, her lifelong friend. Oh, my God, my blood is boiling for so many reasons. One, I happen to be a class action lawyer. I fought for consumers all my life. I fought asbestos companies on behalf of asbestos victims, mesothelioma victims. I've been fighting corporate greed for 30 years. And what drives me insane are these far-left liberal politicians, whether it's Elizabeth Warren or whether it's Maura Healey, who get up there and they pretend to be for consumers. They pretend to be for individual working people. They pretend to care about the poor people, the underserved communities in Roxbury, Mattapan, Brockton, Springfield, and the list goes on. And a predatory lender like this is committing fraud because all that fine print, they know that those people don't understand what they're signing. They don't understand that they're selling their soul. They're giving up 40% of price appreciation over a period of 30 years. So as Jess said to everybody out there, you know, the American dream in this country has been defined by owning your home. And people, that's their number one asset, and they work all their life. And if that home has appreciated to $1 million in the greater Boston area, like average homes now, you're going to give 40% to this predatory lender. And Maura Healey gives her a free get out of jail card. It is disgusting. It is corruption at its core. And what else do you got to say? I'm sorry. Excuse the rant, but I just it drives me insane. But go ahead, Jess.
Well, there is some good news. So actually, 2 days after that bill has passed and this provision is put into place to protect Blue Hub, the attorneys for Blue Hub Capital filed a motion to dismiss these lawsuits against them. And our Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, actually filed an amicus brief on this, basically saying, hey, listen, this may be a new law, but it can't apply to existing lawsuits. So we think that they were clear there. The news around Blue Hub today and yesterday is that Andrea Campbell has drafted some sort of new provisions that would require companies like Blue Hub to be more forthcoming with this kind of information. But let's be honest, if you're doing the digging that I'm doing, Blue Hub Capital hasn't issued any mortgages in Massachusetts for the past year and a half. They've actually moved on to other states where they're doing this across the country. They've tapped out in Massachusetts. We're on to them. We know what's happening, and nobody is using their services anymore. The other thing too, John, just so you know, John Featherston, who is a manager at one of the Healy hotels, I reached out to him and asked if he was familiar with this company. And he said one of their subsidiaries, which is a company that actually helps fund loans to migrants who are trying to become residents here, was soliciting migrants at the hotels. And this is a subsidiary of Blue Hub Capital. So they've got their hands in everything in this state. They're preying on the most vulnerable people. And I love to see that a Democrat, I believe from Brockton, where many of these Blue Hub customers were living and these situations with their houses were occurring, is kind of getting involved and supporting this new legislation that's going to try to help make this more transparent. But in my opinion, John, it's too little too late. The damage has already been done. And by the way, the majority of these people who lost their homes, they're minorities. They're Black homeowners. And again, sometimes first time homeowners in, generations. And Blue Hub Capital owns them, unfortunately.
Yeah. Listen, how come now? Why aren't we seeing? I guess you already answered it, but I have to say it. I I think the Boston Globe should have a picture of Maura Healey with the word corruption in capital letters with her and her friend, the CEO. But I haven't seen anything really on the mainstream media. I just don't understand why that is blatant corruption where you have a politician giving a friend a free pass that says, you know what, I'm going to just make it unlawful for consumers to sue you for fraud and misrepresentation. It is insane, and it should boil your blood. And these are the stories that voters need to hear. And I sure hope that whether it's Keneally or Shortsleeve or McNogue or whoever, that they talk to you. And this is something that should be a centerpiece, I believe, when they're on the debate stage with her, Maura Healey, and bringing it up.
I mean, if these candidates can't bring it out to the forefront, I'm not sure anybody else will. It's definitely something I think that can turn a voter in one direction next year. But again, you just said it, they have to get that information first. So that's why every day I wake up, John, I'm like, we got to get out here. We got to keep pushing, because you never know who it's. I mean, I could wake up like today and get a call from you and say, hey, come on my show. Let's talk a little bit about this. Now your audience heard that story. Right. And then maybe someone else will see it and I'll call and, call into another show. We've got to get that. These are facts. I'm not fabricating this. None of this is untrue. These are all facts that exist. It's just getting that information, making it easy to understand and break it down just the way you said. Maura Healey took care of her friend. She took care of her bestie to protect her so she can go and make more money. Elise Cherry, as the CEO of Blue Hub, makes like $1.5 million a year. It's a nonprofit, but she's profiting for sure.
100%. We got 40 seconds left. Anything you're working on now that you want to share, or any thoughts on politics as we move forward? Anything?
I'm very excited for this gubernatorial election cycle. We've got some fantastic candidates that have stepped up.
Do you see momentum building for?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. People are thirsty for change. We've got to get this message out to other pockets across the state and change voters' minds.
Absolutely. You can reach Jess at Jess Machado Show. That's JessMachado Show. Donate, please, if you can. Every little bit helps. We need people like her out there pounding the pavement for transparency and truth. Jess, thank you so much. I'll be seeing you soon, okay?
Thanks, John, very much.
You're listening to The Hard Truth with John Deaton. John Deaton is a Marine veteran, lawyer, and best-selling author who stared down poverty, survived street violence, and beat cancer to fight another day. From the streets to the courtroom, Deaton has taken on corporate greed and fought against government fraud and overreach. Always for the little guy, a proud father of 3 girls, Deaton brings you the raw, unfiltered truth that hits hard and holds nothing back. Join us as we dive into his journey, his vision, and what he hopes to bring to the people of